Colleges across the country have been scrutinizing their admissions process, with standardized tests like SAT or ACT under intense debate. Critics argue that these tests favor the elite, highlighting a fundamental inequality, while advocates contend that they serve a crucial role. These tests, they say, provide a standardized measure of a student's comprehension, problem-solving skills, and the potential for academic success. The opposition counters, stating that reliance on these tests alone would favor students from wealthier backgrounds, further disadvantaging their low-income counterparts. However, studies show that these test scores, particularly those from students at under-resourced schools, could be the best predictor of future academic success. But wait, there's more to this debate, something that may surprise you. You're just going to have to wait to find out. What's up, my amazing and curious folks? Ready to unravel mysteries together? I'm your host, Cesar, and with me is the ever-enthused commentator, Sonia Guimarães. Together, we're going to dive deep into today's curiosity. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Let's keep our curiosity fueled, shall we?
Hey folks, can't wait to delve into today's topic with all of you.
To give you some context, let's talk about one of the most stressful periods in the lives of many teenagers, the college application process. It's a whirlwind of questions. Should they apply? Is college right for them? Which colleges should they apply to? And in recent years, a new question has joined this list. Should they take a standardized test like the SAT or ACT? These tests come with a cost, both financially and otherwise. They aren't free to take, and there's an additional fee for sending the scores to colleges. The financial burden can be heavy, especially for students who want to take the test multiple times to improve their scores. And then there's the argument that these tests don't necessarily measure a student's growth, full potential, or chances of future success. Critics also argue that standardized tests can hurt diversity. Wealthier students with access to more resources can prepare better for these tests, gaining an unfair advantage. But here's the catch. While the tests may favor the wealthier students, they offer colleges and universities a unique and powerful way to identify students from less privileged backgrounds who are capable of extraordinary academic success. So, the question becomes, should colleges responsibly include standardized testing as part of their admissions process? Now let's take a step back and understand what a standardized test is. The idea is simple, straightforward, and compelling. Ideally, a universally applicable skills assessment test would measure a student's current comprehension and problem-solving skills in any subject area. Math and verbal skills are the two most prominent areas forming the foundation for many future careers. But does the reality match the ideal? Let's find out. So the SAT and ACT are the most popular skills assessment tests in the US. They were widely used until 2020 when the pandemic prevented many testing sessions. Consequently, many colleges made these tests optional. This was also around the time when these tests faced criticism for perpetuating existing inequities.
Inequities? Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. It's observed that students from higher income schools, predominantly white, tend to score higher on these tests. More time, effort, and resources spent studying for the test, unsurprisingly, improve outcomes.
And what about students from schools that can't offer such resources?
Well, they, on average, score lower. The idea was, by making the tests optional, these inequities could be reduced. However, eliminating these tests doesn't necessarily eliminate the biases. It just means that these biases need to be accounted for if the data is to be used responsibly.
So the argument is that the data from these tests isn't useless. It just needs to be used correctly.
Exactly. If standardized test scores were the sole metric used for college admissions, it would result in an extremely biased student population at the college. It's a known fact that higher scores correlate with the student's family wealth and the affluence of their school.
So wealthier students have an advantage?
Yes. Wealthier schools can afford to provide more rigorous and varied course offerings, additional tutoring, and dedicated test preparation, among other things. Unfortunately, lower-income students rarely receive such benefits and perform worse on these tests on average.
So the system seems pretty skewed against lower-income students.
Unfortunately, yes. Research done from the early 2000s to the mid-2000s has consistently shown this inequity. It's a complex issue that requires a lot of thought and action to resolve. If colleges used only test scores for admissions, it would create a pool of applicants biased towards high-income students. Interestingly, there's a trend of legacy admissions where students are more likely to get into an elite college if their parents went there, especially if they are from high-income families.
That doesn't seem fair, does it?
Not at all. It further disenfranchises those from low-income areas. Yet, eliminating test scores isn't a perfect solution either. Though raw test scores aren't necessarily the best predictive tool for future success, they do provide some measure of a student's abilities.
But that's not the only thing colleges look at when admitting students, right?
Right. College admissions offices typically look at high school academic performance, letters of recommendation, personal statements, and extracurricular activities, among other things. However, many of these signals of achievement again favor students from high-resource backgrounds.
So even the other criteria are biased?
Unfortunately, yes. For example, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds who exhaust the course offerings at their schools might not have enough rigorous classes on their transcripts. Without test scores to supplement these components, admissions officers might not have enough evidence of their readiness for college.
So it's a complicated issue with no easy solutions.
Exactly. It's a complex system that needs careful consideration and continuous improvement to reduce the inherent biases and provide equal opportunities to all students, regardless of their socioeconomic background. Since many colleges, including the Ivy League schools, moved away from requiring standardized tests in 2020, they've struggled to identify which students from low-resource backgrounds would thrive in college. This challenge was further amplified by the Supreme Court decision in 2023 to remove affirmative action from the college admissions process.
Can you give us an example to illustrate the impact of that decision?
Certainly. After affirmative action was removed, students from low-resource schools and of low socioeconomic status had fewer ways to demonstrate their potential to admissions officers. Ironically, the decision left the most unfair criterion, legacy admissions, in place. This meant that average students from wealthy backgrounds could secure college spaces that they didn't earn based on merit. For example, let's look at the University of Florida. In their law school class of 2026, the percentage of Black or Hispanic students dropped significantly compared to the previous year.
That's unfortunate, but there must be some ways to address these inequities, right?
Yes, indeed. In July of 2023, social scientists Raj Chetty, David Dimming, and John Friedman analyzed anonymized admissions data from several colleges to study which admission criteria were most relevant for selecting students who achieved academic and post-academic success. Based on their findings, Dartmouth and Yale became the first two Ivy League schools to reinstate the requirement of standardized test scores for admission.
So even though standardized tests have their flaws, they do provide valuable information in the admissions process.
Precisely. They are one part of a complex admissions puzzle. The challenge is to use them wisely and responsibly, along with other criteria, to ensure a fair and equitable admissions process. An unexpected finding from the data shows that standardized test scores from students from low-resource schools are the best predictor of future academic success, even better than high school grades or personal statements.
So even though the tests have their issues, they can give a good indication of a student's future success.
Exactly. And during the test-optional period of college admissions, there were several cases where applicants didn't submit their scores, but had they done so, it could have significantly increased their chances of admission.
That's surprising, but what about career success? Do these tests predict that too?
Interestingly, yes. Higher standardized test scores correlate well with future economic success, as shown by data from 2023. High school GPA, on the other hand, shows no such correlation.
So how should colleges use this information?
The key is to use standardized testing responsibly as one part of a comprehensive profile that includes other factors like parent income, race, gender, and high school GPA. When researchers controlled for each of these factors, they found that it was the standardized test score alone that allowed them to identify students who stand out academically and are ready for college.
So, even if you're from a low-income area or a school with fewer resources, a standardized test could help highlight your academic potential?
Precisely. It gives students the chance to shine and demonstrates their academic potential better than any other metric. It's a tool that, despite its flaws, can play an essential role in a fair and equitable admissions process. While standardized tests can only identify a mix of talent, skills, and experience, it's important to note that only skills and experience can be bought. Talent, although some may not like to admit, is innate and often identified through standardized tests, particularly when it emerges in unexpected places.
So, these tests might actually be a good way to spot potential?
Indeed. Consider this: an analysis of a student's first-year GPA in college in relation to their standardized test score showed a strong correlation, but there was an extremely weak correlation with their high school GPA.
That certainly raises questions about the validity of high school GPAs as predictors of college readiness.
Exactly. Now, there's been a debate about whether students should select the option to share their test scores with colleges. The data suggests that for students likely to score high on these tests, sharing their scores is beneficial.
How so?
Services like the Student Search Service for the SAT and the Educational Opportunity Service for the ACT can provide opportunities for students from under-resourced backgrounds. If students score above a certain threshold, colleges may identify them as strong candidates. Elite colleges, including Ivy League schools, might then reach out and encourage them to apply.
So these services can actually help students from less advantaged backgrounds get noticed by top colleges.
Absolutely. They can provide opportunities for students to be found by colleges that might offer substantial financial aid, and these could be opportunities that the students might not have considered or known were available to them. Regardless of the socioeconomic status of their high school, the SAT score remained a strong indicator of a student's first-year college GPA. This once again highlights the link between standardized test performance and college readiness. Let's consider who the elite colleges are most at risk of passing over. If these colleges are aware of the student's background, including their family's wealth status and the resources available at their high school, we know who they're most likely to admit. These students typically come from wealthy families, attend well-funded schools, have legacy connections to the school, or participate in the lucrative independent educational consultant industry.
So the scales are quite tipped in favor of students with more resources.
Unfortunately, yes. However, if you're not from a wealthy background and don't attend a resource-rich school, can you still compete against students who do? Absolutely. In fact, a high standardized test score can identify you as a standout in a way that no other measurement can.
I see. The data still shows a strong correlation then between test performance and college success.
Exactly. High performers on standardized tests might not capture everyone you want to admit, and not all high achievers go on to achieve the desired success in college and beyond. But they are definitely among the students a college would want to admit. Now, I want to take this moment to reflect on what we've discussed so far. We've uncovered the role of standardized tests in predicting academic and future success, but also highlighted the disparities in resources available to students. The question is, can these tests serve as a tool for educational justice? And although our society is said to offer equal opportunities, how true is this in the realm of education? I invite you, our listeners, to ponder on these questions. Are you surprised by these findings? Do you think that standardized tests level the playing field, or do they simply reinforce existing inequalities? Don't forget to share your thoughts with us. We often hear about the American dream, the idea that our society is based on equality of opportunity, where success is determined by merit. But how true is this when it comes to education?
Good question. Some students face more challenges than others, right?
Absolutely. If you're a first-generation student, or if you don't have great academic grades or extracurriculars, or if you aren't fully aware of what admissions officers are looking for, A high standardized test score can offer an educational opportunity that no other avenue does.
So these tests can actually level the playing field?
In many ways, yes. Matt Brunig, a policy analyst, made a great point. He mentioned that scandals surrounding the SAT and ACT often involve wealthy individuals paying someone to fraudulently take the test for their child. This happens because in this arena, a less privileged but brighter student can outcompete a wealthier but less capable peer.
That's quite a revelation.
Indeed. This isn't to say that Ivy League or similar schools are the only path to success. You can get a great education and have a successful life attending local colleges that don't require standardized testing. However, the goal of all colleges and universities is to give students a merit-based opportunity to compete at all levels, including at the top. It's important, in the spirit of fairness, to offer everyone, especially those with fewer resources, an equal opportunity to show what they can do. And as our discussion has shown, standardized tests can indeed serve this purpose. In today's episode, we've taken an in-depth look into the role of standardized testing in college admissions. Despite the criticisms, these tests hold a unique and powerful position in identifying students with potential for academic success.
Absolutely, Caesar. We've discovered that these tests can provide an equal opportunity platform for students from all backgrounds to demonstrate their academic prowess.
Yes, and notably, for students from low-resource schools, these tests can be a gateway to educational opportunities that might otherwise be overlooked. So it turns out, the SAT and ACT aren't just about filling in the bubbles, they're also about leveling the playing field.
Well put, Caesar. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found this discussion as enlightening as we did. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to blast that like button and share your comments.
And don't forget to share the episode with your friends. Let's get everyone in on the conversation.
As always, it's been a pleasure diving into these curiosities with you. Until next time.
Goodbye, and keep dreaming, and questioning, and exploring. Today's discussion was based on an article titled, "Colleges Should Include Standardized Testing in Admissions," written by Ethan Siegel, and published on Big Think on the 27th of February 2024. The full URL is in the description if you want to delve deeper into the subject. Now I'm off.